Hello, Woden's Day. First on the comment section, I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years. I put about 8 hours a day in every single day and have done for 4 or 5 years, and all I have found out there is confusion when it comes to the money aspect of everything. So when I read in the comment section here on Over the Peak and other places, people that think they have got it cracked and know what's what, I despair. I put a silly hat on every day to remind myself that I don't know what's going on, that I am just a silly person in a silly world. And I wish sometimes some of you would put a silly hat on before you open your fingers up on the keyboards in the comment section. The chances of you knowing what's what are very small indeed. Some obviously small aspects of some mechanical thing that's going on in the world, of course we can know about that. But big pictures, not a hope. Get a silly hat. Keep it real. Or I'm just going to start blocking people on the comment section here on Over the Peak if they're going to keep commenting saying that they know what is what. It is plainly a ridiculous thing to do. Do not do it. Right, out there in the real world, this glasnost from the Fed has given us more information. The New York Times has picked up on it, and we actually have the value of assets, very wishy-washy parameters of their reporting of their assets, and James Bullard hasn't reported. But it's quite interesting that we get things like this because it makes us think how human we all are. Lacquer, Rosengren and Pianalto down at the bottom there haven't got much money. They haven't even got $1 million stashed away. But from the reporting, we've got Plosser at a couple of million, Lockhart at a couple of million, Dudley at 8 million and Fisher at 21 million. And those are kind of minimums. Read the article, it's interesting to see the way they have to report. But like Fisher, he's got $1 million in gold. And it shows that when it comes down to it, these are quite important people having quite important votes, and how much of selfishness will come into their voting. It's just to show it's a human world out there. We're all human and frail and open to saying things. And it's difficult. It's a difficult world. They've got to vote on things like this. This is number 2. What's more important, to keep the price of assets up that they've got lots of, or their other thing that they've got to track at the Fed, which are jobs? These are job openings from the St. Louis Fed, and now in 2012 they're at roughly where they were 9 years ago. It's not quite 10 years ago. Job openings are not there, and that's why people aren't having jobs, because the job openings aren't there. But in a way, it's the Fed's job, if they could possibly do it, to organise that there are more job openings. But if that meant that assets fell in value, would they have personal reasons to think that this would not be a good idea for themselves and their friends? It's all very difficult. And we got in yesterday that one of the biggest assets, the biggest line of assets that Americans hold, the housing. The case Schiller came in again, and it took a little dip again at the end. There is seemingly certainly no rebound in house prices, and quite frankly, why should there be? This is number 4, residential investment as a percentage of GDP, and this is such an important factor in American economic life. It goes back to 1947, just after the Second World War. But if you notice, I'll take you through the blue bars, which are obviously the recessions, we know that. So we're looking at the 1949 recession. Look at residential investment as a percentage of GDP, boom. after that recession finishes, or to drag that recession out of recession, you could even think. Go on to the 54 recession and it's a spike up. 58 recession's a spike up. After the 61 recession, it's not a spike up, but it's a general dragging up into the 60s increase. After the 1970-71 recession, spike up. 74 recession, spike up. You can see how it must happen to get the economy going again. Where are we? Are we up to 91? And then there's a general increase up to the next recession where it just keeps going up again. And then this great falling down, and what the American economy obviously needs. I mean, we know there is so many things, what's it called, where things go up. You don't know if it's coincident or causation. But I think that the American economy certainly needs residential investment as a percentage of GDP to go up to have what could ever be called a real recovery. And it's gone flat at the moment. It's not going down anymore, but it's not spiking up or going up like it has since the Second World War. It's just not cutting it. And I'm guessing, silly hat guessing, that as long as that stays down, the American economy will be blah. A good comment, and I'm reading lots of comments lately in the Financial Times on a banking thing. And Omnitrix writes, when banks used to lend money back in the day, as they say, investors were happy with single-digit ROE. Now, I thought that should be ROI to start with, but he uses it again, ROE, later in the piece, and he obviously knows what he's talking about. So it's return on investment, return on equity, and not return on investment. By investors, I mean our pension fund managers, and this is the big story. What the baby boomers around the world have got about 50 trillion or something in savings. Where are they going to put them? But here we go. I mean our pension fund managers, who are the equity. They're the owners of the banks. Yeah, we know that now, yeah. However, everyone got greedy. No surprise. And single-digit return on equity didn't cut it anymore, and the whole world lost sight of the risk-return ratio. We can understand all that. Banks were forced to increase returns by chasing investment banking returns. You know, you've got your... We won't go into it. You know the difference between normal commercial banking and investment banking. I remember my markets group in a normal bank being told that our return on equity needed to be at least 25% to bring the bank's overall return on equity up, because we were carrying the lending business. You know, they're linked together, but the owners, the pension fund managers, demanded more return on their equity, their ownership, and the banks were forced, if they wanted the ownership to stay high, to give them what they wanted, which was a big return on that investment in the company. And they're carrying the lending business. Lending just couldn't do it, and it can't do it now. Unfortunately, the deposit and lending business is not particularly profitable, and lending uses up a disproportionate amount of regulatory capital. Now, I've done this comment because that's what's making me think, and I'm thinking through a boardroom of a bank and how it works, and how it has to work with its regulatory capital, its leverage ratios, its capital requirements, and how reserves have got to be there for lending, and what else they can do on the asset side of the balance sheet. And it's an interesting thing to think through for a silly-hatted person. But the bottom line there is lending isn't profitable. Gambling with assets is or can be profitable. If everyone's piling in, though, if everyone's piling in, then that thing that everyone's piling into the assets of is going to be going up, and everyone is making on that gamble until it stops. And we have in Europe, during all this period of the gambles working and people loving the euro, and what happened was that they were betting that Greece's return, which was slightly more than everybody else's, was worth just a little bit more. But they were making that little bit more. But the thing is, like in normal retailing, and that's all they're doing with money, they couldn't make it a big margin on selling one good, one deal. They could make smaller margins, but they had to supermarket it. So they had to buy lots and lots and lots and lots of these things to make lots of money out of smaller margins. Meaning that their asset side had to absolutely boom up. Well, it's that side, boom up. And they had to watch the regulatory capital for that. And lending went to the periphery countries. And from euro introduced to Lehman collapse, things were looking good even for youth unemployment in Europe, which has never been particularly clever. But since, you can see it's flying away again, because the bubble has burst, and it's only Germany that seems to be able to have a plan of what to do with the youth. And overall, this is Euro Central Bank and the Euro area labour force. It came in as a start of overall labour force near 10%, and it got itself all the way down to 7.2% with all this confidence and money going in. But the confidence has gone away, and now it's back up to over where it was at the start, and it's at 10.4. Was I going to read that? Yeah, finish with this. Okay, this, I forget who this is actually. The weekend, I'll check. Oh yes, it's Wall Street Examiner. Right. And this is the end of an article. I have been feeling for some time that this would bite the players involved. Although the shipping company stocks have become very depressed of late, the story as it relates to shipping lenders has been relatively overlooked. This is kind of a knock-on from the Baltic Dry Index that I brought you a couple of times lately. Because one of the reasons the BDI has gone down is because there's lots of ships out there, sale and demand, there's lots of ships out there that will do the job. So their rates have come all the way down. But this is saying on the, well, why are all those ships out there? And who has lent all these people the money to build all these ships that are now not economically viable projects? Now the IHT is out quoting industry observers stating that European banks may be facing write-downs on these loans, the shipping loans, on the order of $100 billion. Ships aren't cheap, which is even more than their Greek losses. At my actionable site, that's what you've got to pay for, I am now recommending a bearish strategy using big, poorly capitalized European banks that are not only exposed to sovereign debt, normal, but also to the double impact of inflated commodity lending in general, normal. The market thinks Eltro, that I go on about all the time, and I think multiple lending blow-ups in tandem. In addition to shipping, which he's pushing forward here, I'm including shale natural gas, which is also maladjusted. Natural gas was discussed separately on January the 23rd, and it's just another thing. All this lending to natural gas was meant to be a big money spinner, but as I described yesterday, there's too much sale and demand, and it just hasn't economically worked out very well. And the biggest lenders in the world for just about everything, on all occasions, is always the European banks. It is the centre of a huge economic earthquake that's going on. Bye.